We are back with another punk perspective here. I got my friend again, Crame Brulee.
Yo,
Um,
yo.
I'm gonna talk about a different song this time though. Um, Song that's on the docket today is "Unknown Soldier" by the Casualties. Probably one of
Yes,
the
sir.
first street punk bands I'm doing, which was just telling him, was just telling you about too. That I was pretty excited for because like right around like 2004, 2005, I really went into this like niche of like the Unseen,
Yeah.
Anti-Flag, Casualty. I got really into these bands and um
Yeah, that was a really cool time for that kind of sound. Yeah, and it's funny because like if you with punk it's so funny because it depending on who you talk to, they'll have a different name for the subgenres. Like I've heard
mhm.
street punk. I think that's the specifically New York label. I've like on the West Coast, I usually just get called like new
Hardcore
hardcore or
punk.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny because there's so many different ones. Yeah, there's garage punk, there's street punk, there's this, there's that, there's crust punk.
Yeah, which is something that I thought was really stupid about too. Was just like, because one, I got into the music because it was usually a genre of music that didn't give a fuck about like labels and
Yeah.
what are going to be categories, all that. Then all of a sudden, you start getting these like little cliques within the punk community, and it's like, well, that's pop punk, or this is
Oh,
street
don't even get me
punk, gutter
started on
punk.
that.
Yeah.
Like, there are casts of punks that will be like, no effects is pop punk, but Blink 182, they're not punk, they're just pop, or like all kinds of stuff like that. It's like, dude, it's music. Like,
Yeah.
I
And no,
get
I
like the
get it too.
anti-establishment, but it's like if they've got the right drum. I mean, Blink 182 were literally listening to No Effects, and that's where they came up with their sound. Same with Green Day. Like these bands, they were born and bred on that sound, and they just found a way to make it more commercial. And like love it or hate it, like it's still, yeah, at least the surface level, it's still punk.
That's what I'd say too. And usually the reason why you get into it was like Blink 182 was still kind of doing what they like to do. It was making, jokes about being naked or whatever,
Oh
dick
yeah.
jokes, all that, which was funny. And I think the big question that comes into play, and this is where I think as when you're as like a young teenager, people get it kind of twisted, is there's a difference of selling out and changing like the music they make it for, right? Like and you would hear it in some bands, they would be singing about, certain issues, whatever, then suddenly
Yeah.
you get that label and you can tell the music just didn't feel genuine. But I can't say that
Yeah.
with like Green Day. Like they sound pretty much the same. Besides getting better,
Yeah.
they kept their
It
ethos. They
it
kept
is
it like
interesting. Yeah, in punk, it's like if you make it big, you're automatically labeled as selling out. Like two bands that really get that claim is the
Hoover.
Offspring after their Smash record,
Mm-hmm.
and also Bad Religion when they left
Their own label to
their
Atlantic,
own
right?
label. Yeah, when there was that split when Gerwitz was no longer on the band for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, yeah, but if you listen to their sound, it's like they didn't really change all that much.
And
Like
when you
they're
hear them
slightly
talk
less
about it
gritty,
too,
but the
yeah.
topics are all this. They're still talking about the same kind of shit, you know?
Anti-Flag went to RCA, and I remember that was
Yeah,
also another big one because it was like, oh, RCA gives money to this, that, or whatever. And maybe it's true. Maybe for some it's really good to look at, but the band themselves were still they were just getting a better distribution offer, right?
yeah. I
Like,
mean, a lot of times that's what it is. I mean, you don't need a label the same way that you did back then. But so things have changed a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get properly distributed and you want to be able to play globally, it's really hard to do it on an independent label. Like there are bands that do it, but you really got to hustle.
and if you're still staying
So
true to yourself, and the record labels, you're not fighting with them, like then who cares, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. But I will say the Casualties, they're one of those bands that they refuse to sell out in any way, shape, or form. Like they are. You know, and I mean this with no disrespect. They are like the stereotype of like the anti-establishment punk band.
It was. They were very far in there, and that's why one reason why I did get into them for a minute too. Them, the Unseen, Anti-Flag as well, right? Like a lot of those bands at the time, they were
Yeah,
very dedicated in what they were doing,
yeah,
and really speaking to that. Well, like Casualties in general has a lot of like either like immigrant or like working class
yeah.
anthems.
Because most of the people in the band are from Latin America, as I understand,
Yeah,
and they actually have a larger following in Latin America than they do here. That's kind of what's kept them afloat all this time.
it makes
Like
sense.
the album this came out on, they re-released the whole album in Spanish.
They did?
Yeah, they did
That
like
would
4 years later.
be freaking awesome, man.
Yeah.
Love to hear. One of my favorite bands that I got into as well. I don't know how big they got out in Portland, but it was a band called Union 13 as well. That they were just from that East LA though. But yeah,
Okay.
Casualties, yeah, they're from New York. Um, let's get into the song.
Yeah.
Let me read the lyrics here first. Unknown Soldier. Okay. All right, pulling it up. So it would help if I typed in lyrics, right? All right. Yeah, starts right off. 2, 3, 4. uh Joe is out of school, didn't fucking ask for much, couldn't get a job. The Marines, his last hope. Down at the front line with a gun, not a toy, killing many men, not asking what for. Joe's family, the comrades next to him, die one by one. His luck is running out. Joe wrote back home, his parents unemployed, the rich is fucking laughing, profits from the war. Go. Joe is off to die for another senseless war. No arms, no legs, his mother cries at home. Joey wears the flag, so proud to fight for us. And the government that doesn't give a fuck. Go. Joe is off to die for another senseless war. No arms, no legs, his mother cries at home. Joey wears the flag, so proud to fight for us. And the government just doesn't give a fuck. Marching
Yep.
to the left, marching to the
Marching to
right,
the right.
marching to the front line, just a fucking sight. Marching to the left, marching to the right, marching to the on the front line. What a way to die. Joey, 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 tell me what you see now. Joey, 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 please come back home now. Marching to the left, marching to the right, marching on the front line. What a fucking sight. Marching to the left, marching to the right, marching on the front line. What a way to die. This came out 2004. And
Yes,
so
sir.
we are like a year into the Iraq invasion. I'll call it that, right? Weapons of mass
Yeah.
destruction. Well, I think we need to talk about that too, because
Yeah. And we were well into the Afghan war at that point.
well into which I was pretty young. I was like 15 at the time, so I already had friends that were like, I try to talk them out of it usually too, but like shout out to my friend Nick Steele, some certain friends of mine that were starting to enlist, and it was really starting to become like a real thing. And I guess like I kind of understood like the Afghan war to a point. Like I didn't really believe all the bullshit to why we were there, etc. But then this one, and I was young, but I knew it just didn't sit right, right? Like it was like, what if they have weapons of mass destruction? I saw them debating, and like next thing you know, we're just like in Iraq. Um, and kind of like to that song, I felt like this was a very senseless war, and it was going to be my friends, my generation going in, and like you said, we weren't even done with Afghanistan. We were still sitting there, which is funny. Afghanistan, we don't even get out of until like we just got out recently, like
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago. So,
Long time. Long
um,
time.
and it seemed like it was bullshit. I was 15. And I was like,
Yeah.
we don't have weapons of mass destruction. No weapons of mass destruction. That's what they pushed on us, had us
Yeah.
scared.
It's
And
just
next thing,
imperialism, you know. I mean, that's really what it was. We went there for oil. Yeah, I mean, like defense contracting and oil. That's what it was for.
and no one seemed to really be shout like like besides like these few bands at the time, there seemed to be like no real like out for it. I think there was like the Dixie Chicks might have. There's a couple other like artists that like almost tried speaking up at the
Yeah.
time, but they got like ostracized. It was like the first like versions of like cancel.
Yeah, and the Dixie Chicks, yeah, they got ostracized for their stance on the war in the Middle East, and they don't even go by Dixie Chicks anymore. They just go by the Chicks.
I like the there's a band that has a good Me First and Gimme Gimmes has a good cover of one of their songs.
Oh, dude, their country album rocks. The Me First and the Gimme Gimmes
Yeah.
country. That's one of my favorites from them.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know, but no, but they the fact was is the country even like went against them. And they were like these just
Yeah,
you know girl
yeah,
country music. And it's like they just said I don't believe in the war or whatever. And phew.
yeah. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but there was a very strong rift in country because if you look at like old country, it was very anti-establishment. Like, there's this old interview. I'll have to find it and send it to you, where it was Johnny
Yeah.
Cash, and a few of the other like old school outlaw country people. It was like a roundtable discussion in the '90s, and they're
Mm.
talking about new country and they're like bashing on it because they're like, why are they like pro military and pro cops? Fuck them. Yeah, in the '90s and the 2000s, there was like a very political shift and polarization and making it more like, more right wing.
And it
Uh,
went far that way, at least
yeah,
it seemed that way growing up. Which so yeah,
yeah.
I guess what did this song mean to you? So when you heard it, I guess take us to it. When was the first time you heard it and kind of your
I
memory?
used to, yeah, like, one of my best friends in high school was like really into street punk and stuff like that. And I would listen to this kind of stuff when I was skateboarding. And what really drew me into a lot of this kind of punk music was the riffs.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that guitar lick at the beginning, I learned how to play that on guitar like pretty quickly. And I would just kind of like mess around with that and then play this song when I was at the skate park or whatever. So that's what really grabbed me because it has almost like it's very punk, but it's kind of updated in that it kind of has like in the way that yeah, the chord percussion and the note structure, it's kind of reminiscent of like thrash metal a little bit.
Mm.
um and but it's like it's more melodic and it's catchier. And it's yeah, it's shortened. You don't get like these long drawn out sections. They're just taking similar notes that you would find in thrash metal and they're like, how do we make this more punk? And it's just fucking dope, man. And like for a long time, yeah, I mean, I was raised Mormon. I was raised in a very right-wing household. I didn't process, like, it's funny, like if you were to look at the catalog of music I was listening to at the time,
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh yeah, this dude, he lives in like a hippie household and can do whatever the hell he wants. And it's like, no, very much the opposite. And yeah, I was raised on a lot of Republican ideals, but it slowly over time it just kind of felt wrong to me, and I couldn't tell you why. And yeah, if you were to tell me what I believed, I would have told you what my parents told me. But it was just, it all felt kind of off, and this kind of music was my outlet, and I knew it was anti-establishment. I knew that it was against the war, but I would kind of justify it by like, oh, dude, but it sounds fucking sick.
Yeah, you like the feel and stuff of it. See, I guess for me,
Yeah,
I was like right at this like ripe age to where the music was really starting to connect it with me. And I was like, I couldn't understand why not more people were interested what was going on. I was like, it's gonna be our lives. Like we already have friends that
yeah,
are like enlisting, going to war. What's this war about? Does it matter? And people would just tell me I was boring, whatever. And the only like little outlet I had was like punks, and they would like be singing this. And what I really liked about this one, which is like seems to be in like a kind of more of the category of like the street punk or hardcore punk, um, is when you went and saw them live. I went and me and my friend went to the show in
oh,
Phoenix,
dope.
we saw was the Unseen, Casualties, and Anti-Flag. It was like that was the lineup.
That's a really good lineup.
It was very fun. It's 2004. And what was awesome about this song too is you kind of remember if you I don't know if you listened to it this week or not, but
Yeah.
it has this part where he's shout. There's like that shouting, so
Yeah.
you get that very strong community feel. And I remember at the show, the circle pit's going, and he lets all us just start shouting that the chorus basically, right?
Yeah.
And that community feel and it works.
That's a classic street punk thing.
Yeah, it sounds better too in like the live show almost than it did even on the album. And you start really getting that like kind of community feel to it. And um man, just it was one of the first songs that that got me. There was other ones. There's like comes to mind is like I guess like the Dead Kennedys Holiday in Cambodia.
Oh yeah.
Anti-Flags, Die for Your Government.
Yeah.
Even the Exploited, like Let's Start a War, said Maggie one day.
Well, the Exploited, okay.
Yeah.
Like I love the Exploited, but here's an argument I'll make about bands like the Exploited. They are really easy to co-opt because their lyrics are just like pro-violence. Like you can make arguments for what they're trying to say in either direction because they don't really have a lot to them. I'm not saying they're brainless, but like, you know, people might get mad at me using it as an example, but sex and violence, they're literally just shouting sex and violence for 4 minutes.
Sex, violence. Yeah, I know.
And yeah, like let's start a war. That is not like
Isn't that the well, and I don't want to get into it, but Let's Start a War, and it said Maggie one day, right?
well, let's start a war. I think is actually a Fear song, if I recall correctly. It's been covered several times. And Fear was a satirical band, but they were one of the first bands to get co-opted by the right because all their songs are like, let's bomb them. We hate fags. But it's like a lot of what they're saying tongue in cheek. But yeah, like it's infamous. If you can easily find a video of it on YouTube. When John Belushi got Fear to play SNL in 1981, they had a bunch of famous people in the punk scene that were like dancing on stage, but there were fucking skinheads and fascist punks in the audience that stormed the stage. Like, yeah, there are certain brands of punk that are like very violent forward that
Yeah.
whether or not they intended it, that is exactly why there are fascist punks.
Yeah, well, I think there's that very nihilistic
Yeah,
aspect of punk stars like G.G. Allen. I don't want to go too much on the tone there, but he was a menace. He was violent. He didn't have any moral
yeah,
standards. He would
yeah,
go to the
man.
show, and the idea of the show was to do junk and fight, pretty much, right? Like
Yeah,
what they would just do. He shit on stage. It was
you know,
not saying. I
and
was thinking the Exploited because that to me was always like an anti-war song. I guess I was thinking of
I
anti-war.
mean, and you can argue it that way, but they have so many songs that are like pro-violence and yeah, and they almost feel like pro-hatred sometimes. And it's like if you were to ask them, they'd probably be like, "No, that's not what we're talking about." But in the same way, in a similar vein, um, uh, the Ian, what's his name? The lead singer
Okay.
for Minor
Oh, yeah,
Threat.
my friend.
Yeah, there's an interview that he did where they were asking him about his song. I'm sorry. It's like I'm sorry, I'm white or something like that.
Guilty of being white.
Yeah, guilty of being white. And yeah, he's like, well, when I wrote that, it was anti-racist. Like I was in DC. I was, 1 in 20 people were white. And it was just like, don't compare me to other white people. I'm me.
Yeah.
But there were, fascist punks in Northern Europe that were taking that and completely out of context and
Yeah.
using it in a different way. And it's like, how could he have known that that was going to happen?
Yeah, it's kind of the risk you get when you do make music is that you're
Yeah,
gonna
it's like you don't own it anymore. And it's,
um
yeah, you can any time that you write a line like that, it's like if you're not, explicitly clear, and even if you are, there's going to be someone that's going to use that and co-opt it in a way that you
Yeah,
didn't
even
plan
though it's
on.
clear, you know, one song that the like Proud Boys and Right Wing stole we about from the Offspring is "Gotta Keep Them Separated."
Do
They're like
you know what that song's actually about?
it's about a couple that hates each other, right? That's how I always heard it was, you know.
Um, I saw this in an interview. So a lot of people don't know this, but the lead singer, Dax Holland, the lead singer of The Offspring, is a biogeneticist, and he was in college, and he was working with bacterial colonies in petri dishes, and he had to keep them separated.
Yeah, but yeah, see, I didn't even know. I like the song. It
And
sounds
then
good, and
he
I was
started to, yeah, and then he was like taking that and putting it in a different context, and then he
yeah,
came up where it was really about gang violence in LA.
one
But
goes to the morgue, the other jail. Like, yeah, I always thought of it like,
yeah, yeah, like
but it makes
it
sense.
means multiple things, but it's really funny because it originally came from him working with petri dishes.
Yeah. And then a bunch of skinheads come along and they're like, yeah, this song is about
Yeah.
white people. We should be separated. And you know, it's like, what?
I
No.
mean, dude, there's so yeah, like Rage Against the Machine songs get co-opted
Oh, they
sometimes,
can
which
get
is so
co-op.
funny.
And that's what's scary about when you put that stuff out there. I guess I start thinking, well,
Yeah,
part of that stuff too with the violence though, you know, to go on like, you know, to play the like devil's advocate of it too, is I know like the punk scene, especially like during like mid 80s, late 80s, was very violent. Like if you ever like start reading about like the TSOL and suicidal tendencies, that LA,
yeah,
like they were
yeah,
basically
yeah,
all gangs. It was all just like
yeah, and Black
bands of
Flag and all that. Yeah,
yeah.
I've seen a lot of documentaries about Black Flag shows and how violent they could get.
Yeah, I think Henry Rollins is no saint. I think he hit a girl in like one of his like shows. Pretty sure.
Someone bit his ear, I think, and I think that was when he started to be like, "Hey, we got to quit getting so violent."
Yeah. Fat Mike talks about being at a suicidal tendencies show and his friend got stabbed. Like it was just,
Yeah,
'cause I think part of that violence might just have been
I mean,
chalk it up as a product of the time. I don't know,
product
but
of the time, also testosterone.
yeah, that was a place where you
And
could just go escape
fast
and
music
yeah,
does kind of bring that out to some degree.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I would say also kind of a product of the time.
yeah. So exploit, I didn't know too much. I was just thinking. So back to that track, I said the exploit for thinking about let's start a war, but I was thinking Dead Kennedys as well. I was thinking this is like one of those few like anti-war songs
Yeah,
that. And
I
here's a
mean,
question too.
there's a
And
few of them.
what I found hard about this was, and I don't know how it was in like you know your high school or whatever, but I kind of even noticed the ref a little bit too, to where when you're going out there and you're saying fuck war, anti-war, it's not the same as saying fuck the troops, which somehow
Yeah,
always ends up getting twisted. And it's like you want dead soldiers. You're so like, no, it's not what the song's about at all. It's actually the opposite of that. It's that they would, you know,
yeah.
care
I
about
mean,
them.
this song is literally talking about like the fascist military complex and how they don't actually care about the people that are fighting the war. You're just a pawn. And yeah, talking about wheeling him out to the front lines and he doesn't even have any limbs left, which is such a visceral image.
Yeah.
And it kind of like for completely different reasons, but it kind of reminds me of like a more political version of She's Nubs. um, just a surface level comparison, of course, but um, no, yeah, I mean it's honestly the lyrics are incredibly simple, and they're very catchy, but they really paint a picture where it's like this is a military complex and it's just shipping people out over and over again and doesn't give a fuck about any of them. Nowhere in that song does it say to me like "fuck the troops." It's more "fuck the system that's shipping out the troops."
Yeah, which is funny. Is like I feel like it's weird that there's always this like kind of like grift to where like military culture then punks. Like why I guess is the question of the military because the military has to be 100% bought in. I guess if you're going to be in the military, you have to be 100% bought in. And what's
Yeah,
is that why? Because I can see the logic in, hey, this is our troops, and we obviously need a reason for them. And I think fighting the Nazis was probably a pretty good idea, but can we question these other wars that were probably bullshit? I mean,
oh
almost
yeah,
any war I think with since World War II is almost seems to because we had the Korean War, which is domino effect was a bullshit war for us to be in. Vietnam War,
yeah,
which we I think really learned about ourselves. We sprayed our own troops with Agent Orange. That was like the antithesis of like the fact the government won't give a fuck about us.
yeah,
And then it just trickles on.
yeah, man. I mean, our country has been in war for more years than it hasn't been.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. You'd think, I guess, crazy, but I guess not. You know,
I mean, there's money in it.
hmm
That's why we do it. We do it, follow the money. Um, yeah, it's all about the money.
yeah, yeah. There's another very similar song. I guess funny you said she's Nubs, but the band The Addicts has a song called Johnny Was a Soldier.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and it's kind of gives the same feel, except for in their series, in their version, he becomes an amputee as well, but he's just more pissed off that he can't hook up with chicks anymore, which of course is The Addicts.
Yeah, I will say that Casualties are definitely one of the more blatantly political bands. I mean, there's a few of them that are. I will say early Anti-Flag, the Casualties,
Crass,
Crass. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Obviously, the Dead Kennedys, um,
Subhumans.
Subhumans. Oh yeah, Million Dead Cops. Yeah, that's an easy one. Yeah, I mean they're out there. The Oi Scouts. There's a
Oh,
few of
I heard
them.
the Oi Scouts in forever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they
You
weren't
talk
around
about
that
sounds
long.
that can get co-opted to where I don't know why it is, but it seems like a lot of like, that skinheads
Yeah,
get into Oi, and the next thing
yeah.
it starts off like in soccer games, and then
It all gets co-opted, man. I mean, like skinheads is a perfect example. Skinhead movement started out as a left-wing anti-fascist movement in London.
yeah,
A lot of people don't know that. That was in the 80s.
yeah,
And yeah, if you look up like early skinhead punk bands, a lot of them are like blatantly anti-fascist.
that
But
does surprise me.
it got co-opted, So when we talk about skinheads, that immediately you just assume we're talking about the exact opposite of where it came from.
Yeah, I liked
It's tricky, man.
Vinny Stigma kind of talks about a little bit of it, from Agnostic Front. And we're like, well, when skinhead started, going this thing, why'd you have to why'd they keep fighting for that term, skinhead? And like, why wouldn't you just let it go? And his thing was like, well, one, it was their subculture, and
Yeah,
he's not gonna, give in and let this, racist basically win. And so
yeah,
why he'll fight tooth and nail for what's their, culture. And just for the most part around New York and stuff, people you learn real quickly if someone's really a racist or not. Um,
yeah. Most of the time,
yeah. Yeah, and then unless there's a complete, coward pussy about it, and at that point, are they really a threat? I don't know. Probably they are, but um
it's just a different kind. They reinforce the systems of violence.
yeah. What
And
kind of races would
you
you
know,
prefer to? I almost prefer the one that's like blatantly out there, so like, okay, fuck that guy for sure.
I'd say that yeah, blatant ones are easier to avoid.
Yeah.
But
Because the
you
secret
know,
codes and stuff
it's
becomes
like
like too
what would
much.
you rather be killed by, a machete or a knife?
Well, machete'd be much cooler. Oh, I
Yeah, but
died
it's
by a
gonna.
machete, so
Neither of them are gonna be fun.
nothing will be fun. But yeah. Um, So I guess so during what I find funny on this during when this song came out and stuff, you haven't really you were still kind of I guess conservative in your mind, I guess, right? You kind of
Yeah, I mean it started to unravel, by the time I was like 16, 17, but it took time. Um yeah, I mean like I was still a registered Republican until I was like 22, I think. So it
yeah.
took a while, man. It was a slow process, but I got there.
Do you think punk music helped change that or not really then? Was this completely
No, it
separate?
definitely did. Like, it wasn't until I moved to rural Oregon from Sacramento area, California, that I realized how I really wasn't conservative.
Hmm.
Um, because yeah, I was, in California where it is. I mean, there's conservatives and liberals, but it is more of a intermixed community. But rural Oregon, it's just yeah, it's just a bunch of farmers. It's way more isolated. So a lot of their politics were just like way more dumbed down than I was used to. And I was like, wait, no, I don't believe any of this shit.
No. I played this song for some of my friends that enlisted in the military, along with like a bunch of other ones. And what I do like about what this song too is that it's kind of like shilling almost that they keep it like obviously they could have said like his name we learned his name's Joey the soldier or something, but they keep it
Yeah.
unknown soldier because
Hmm.
for so many people that have died in these senseless fucking wars and like going back to forever
Yeah.
usually wind up as like an unknown
Yeah.
grave, unknown soldier,
Most soldiers are.
which I think left that nice like eeriness to it to where and then there's those parts in there where I like that he writes in there too is yeah, you march right and march left. Government doesn't give a fuck. They're just making money off you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And that was like that war I think was the antithesis of like for at least my generation of a bullshit war. I mean, you said it there too. I mean, the fact that I was 15, it's like the dots were very easy to connect. Dick
Yeah.
Cheney, Halliburton, oil. Why are we
Yeah.
in Iraq? Like, it was like
Yeah.
weapons of mass
And
destruction that
why
no one
we're
could
in
see.
Afghanistan for that matter.
Right, yeah, you could get further into it. And that one took up a little bit more of argument because we had the 9/11 and yeah, but
Yeah,
still at the
but
end you can get down to it.
if
There was another bullshit.
if you yeah, because if you really follow the Taliban, most of them were from Saudi
Saudi.
Arabia.
Oh yeah, we're tight with
And it's
Saudi
like
because of
we're
that.
cool with the Saudis, we didn't touch that because we didn't want to fuck up the bag.
Oh, and then I remember too, like 15, they were there having to guard opium fields, and
Yeah.
there was so much bullshit at the time, and people were
Oh
just like
yeah.
bought it up. And I guess mostly with my peers, and this is like one of those levels where I felt like off with my own crowd at least. I started getting connected. I couldn't understand why more people didn't find it serious. Not just like I understood like the whole school. I had really kind of gotten into like a kind of a punk, group of friends at the time. But then there was these like weird subsets, and this was one of them to where there was this like I guess yeah, a lot of people that just took it as just entertainment value, just skateboard music, have
Yeah.
fun, maybe extra testosterone, go to a club or whatever, show. I mean, get in fights to where then there was this more serious aspect of it, and this is one of the more serious songs, which always tend to be the best ones, right? So,
Yeah. No, for sure.
um,
Yeah, but there was some really good punk that was coming out of that time.
mm.
That War on Airism by No Effects, and then Anti Flag came out with a really good album that same year. Yeah, there's a lot of like more politically themed punk music that came out that year. It was a good time
It
for it.
felt like we started like actually like kind of having like a little movement because I guess when I first got into it, it was like yeah, the Pistols, Ramones, they had this late 70s, and then the 80s had Reagan's whole thing, and then it kind of got quiet. Um, And then I remember No Effects. They did well. It was War and Terrorism, and then you had the Rock Against Bush compilations, and I couldn't even vote yet, but you were going there, and there was like spoken word from like Jello Biafra, and it started like making you feel like you were kind of like a part of something as well.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it was something that was like dumbfounded me to where I was like, why can't anyone else see this shit? Like this is to me like that should have been like one of
That's
the
how it
biggest
is.
things, was war is one of the biggest things on the table. We shouldn't ever want war. Um, and we are just like openly cool going over to it, you know.
I mean, propaganda, man. There was yeah, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
our whole system is built on, the military industrial complex. So,
I just don't get how
um,
we can just keep looking, and we're doing it again. Like it happened in this like last election cycle too, to where I remember I was like, "Oh right, well who's like going to be anti, you know, the genocide in Gaza, basically?" And it was like, "Oh no,
neither of
both
them.
sides are going to contribute. Don't
Yeah,
worry, buddy. Both your money
yeah,
will go one way or the other to contribute."
yeah,
It's like I don't want to fucking be any part of that. Like, and no one seems to care. Like for the mainstream at least, like no one seems to be justified
yeah.
of what we're doing or
I mean,
I say we,
it's
but
easy to disassociate from it because we're, continents away from any of the violence that's going on.
yeah,
That's another thing. Like if we were in a country that was just a lot closer to where we were fighting, it would be a lot harder to ignore. But we're talking about something that's happening in the Middle East. That's two, three continents removed from where we're at. So it's easy to just be like, it doesn't affect me.
yeah, that's kind of what it is. Again, it's like still happening for the most. I mean, at least it's not like we have our own troops there anymore, but it's our money. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of anything else I want to say about Unknown Soldier. Besides just that is a fucking awesome like lick. It has a lot of anger. It's not too long of a song, and I remember
Yeah.
listening to it live and being in the circle pit. And Casualties actually were one that had a very like good circle pit, to where there's a lot of like shouting and
That's
uh
dope.
community. Uh yeah, it was
I'm
fun.
jealous you got to see him live. I never had the chance.
Yeah, and they were talking shit to each other. I don't think it's true. Well, I should look it up if it's true now. Because Mark Unseen goes out there and he goes, "Do you know the Casualties have a hairdresser?" And they were paying money to get their locks done. So let's Google real fast. Do the casual
I mean, they might.
have a which again we kind of talked about that. Like if that's their own prerogative, who gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
Which it makes sense, and yeah, it is true. They do. Okay. But it's not very
Yeah,
common,
like
right? You got
they
to do your
gotta.
own
Well,
hawk, you got your own hair.
it's gonna look like shit, if you don't have someone helping you with it, and it's easier if it's a wig. So
Yeah, which I mean, it's
makes
just all
sense.
about fun and stuff too. Anyways, and feeling young and just being goofy for the. I mean, especially at that point, it wasn't like it was brand new.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was. I remember that was funny. Mark Unseen came out. That whole concert was actually really crazy. Me and my friend we drove up, and of course there was like fights in the parking lot, and oh, it was a whole thing. But
Sounds like it.
Casualties put on a good show. The Unseen put on a really good show. Anti-Flag did not.
Really?
Yeah, a little too, I think, drunk and sloppy.
Huh. What
Yeah,
year was this? 2004?
it would have been 2005
Okay. That's a bummer.
because this album was well out. Like it was. They might have already been going on a second album at this point, but yeah.
Yeah, because that would have been right around the time, yeah, Press Corps. That was their big song at that point. That's kind of what they used to be able to go onto a major label.
They saying the song that was real popular at the time was Turncoat, I think. Turncoat,
Yeah,
murder.
that's from the earlier record.
Yeah.
So that must have been before they came out with that album. Because yeah, Press Corps, and then This Is the End for You, My Friend. Those were their two really big songs.
Mm. No, you're right. It's the album that they went to RCA on. That was the
Yeah.
one with the pink background stuff. So no, that one was out there. I just remember everyone went like dead for oh no, it would have been right before Blood and Empire. Sorry, that's what I'm thinking of. So when did Anti-Flag would have just released? What album were they touring in 2005? No, yeah, it was 2005 for Blood and Empire. So that's what they were touring.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah,
Sounds like a cool show. Just a bummer that they were too drunk.
yeah, yeah. They were real sloppy, and you hear they broke up now.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
Because they were
um,
together for a long time.
yeah. They didn't want to break up. A girl came out and actually accused Just Insane of sexual assault.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, can't say I'm surprised.
It's not good. But that's one way where I'm like, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm like, I'm not gonna. That shit sucks. And they break up, fine, so be it. But it doesn't take away all the music they made,
Yeah.
they put out there,
I
especially when you
mean,
have very
I'm
strong.
I'm all for people being held accountable, but it's also like, I don't know. Um, I don't know. Like, yeah, I'm not the one to make a call on that. Like, if they should break up over it or not. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a
But
bummer that
definitely,
they
I
broke
don't
up,
like
but
when
I
some
get
bands
it.
will get rid of like their whole catalogs and stuff. I've seen that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's now you're just hurting the fans.
Yeah. I think like I'm not one of those that's like against cancel culture. It's just to me, um, you can't destroy you at a certain point you have to separate art from who created it. Because one of my favorite quotes, um, Seth Rogen, he has this thing where he's like, uh, yeah, like the way that we will cancel art, but we won't cancel other shit. Like no one, no, yeah, like like. And I'm not saying I think these are good people or anything like that, but like R. Kelly or Michael Jackson or any of them. But then at the same time, no one is like, oh, I'm not gonna, use any products that come off of an assembly line because Henry Ford was a fascist.
Yeah, and there's a way people speak sometimes into where it's like it doesn't even make sense, right? So
Yeah, and it's like Michael Jackson. People will kind of ignore a lot of the claims against him at this point, and it's like, but you
he
bring
has
up
some of the
R.
biggest, like
Kelly
most
or
inconsistent
Kanye
claims.
and I'm not even saying that these are good people, and I don't even really bump them like that. But it's just yeah, it's just weird, and there's no like one rule that is equilaterally applied. It's like very cut and it's very pick and choosy, and it doesn't always make sense.
Yeah,
So it's just like I don't know. To me, it's like everybody needs to make their own choice about it, and I honestly think that yeah, um, we need to give art its own space to breathe because otherwise yeah are you going to go turn around and ignore all of the philosophy that came out of ancient Greece because they were all pedophiles like what are you going to do like
right.
um the we or yeah
You can't separate because I think
Pavlov who
football.
created the Pavlov, who did the Pavlovian dog. He's famous for how he
Mhm.
uh, positive reinforcement.
Yeah,
He killed dozens of dogs to figure that out. Like
yeah. It's
no
like
one is like, oh well, we're not going to use anything he came up with.
yeah,
Um, but then because we just don't value as a society, we don't value art in the same way that we value things that we consider to be more totalitarian. So it's
Yeah.
just I just don't really fuck with that.
It's a weird one. It's like with sports too. It's like people try to pretend like, OJ Simpson wasn't like one of the greatest running backs of all time. Like he
Yeah.
was a piece of shit.
He's,
That doesn't
yeah,
separate to what kind of athlete he was. Like you can still be
exactly.
good,
He
you
was a
can still
fantastic
be shit,
athlete.
but a good athlete. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird they don't let that the separation doesn't. I get
It's
though,
like
maybe they don't want to
I
sit
don't
on it.
think we should ignore the bad. I think that we should, yeah, I think it should be prefaced like, by the way, this person was a horrible human being. However, this is still pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta just separate it. All
Yeah.
right, man. Thanks for doing this one for me. Do you got anything else to say about Unknown Soldier?
Check it out. It's a dope ass song.
Nope. It's the number one song on Spotify. Makes
It
sense.
is, yeah. It's
Yeah,
a catchy song.
it's good. It's catchy and it has some truth to it, man. Like if you
Yeah,
are gonna listen to it for the first time, whatever, read the lyrics. It speaks truth. It's a very serious song, and there's a big truth to it. Yeah.
for sure.
All right, all right, man. Let me